I actually was a recipient of a subpoena from Google and the Department of Justice over the summer in the federal antitrust thing. So we got swept up in that. And I asked ChatGPT, I was like, write a response to the subpoena. And it did.
Welcome back to The Pursuit of Purpose. My name is Chris. I am here with Kenny Katzgrau, and we are going to be going deep into AI and giving you actual practical applications on how to use AI in your business, your personal life, creating processes, saving you time in sales calls, conversations, creating content. But Kenny has come up with 6 practical use cases of using AI, and that's what we're going to be getting into this episode. Without further ado, let's get into this conversation with Kenny.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Chris.
And give us the brief rundown of who Kenny is and what Broad Street does.
Yeah. Well, Kenny is a software developer turned um, entrepreneur or SaaS owner turned news publisher. Um, I think since I was a kid, I wanted to start a company, and through many iterations and many failures, I eventually arrived at Broad Street in 2012, which I had been growing probably for like 4 or 5 years as a solopreneur, just grinding it out to make it happen. And then for another 6 years today with a team of like 13 full time, and then a lot of contractors to support that. But Broadsheet is a very purpose driven company. Actually, we stand for small publishers, and a lot of people are not unaware of the decline in advertising revenue in the news industry and the publishing industry in general. Um, a lot of that ad revenue has gone to other places, primarily Facebook and Google. So when I give my perfect intros to say like, "Hi, I'm Kenny Katzgrau, I'm the CEO of Broadsheet," I usually say we help small publishers kick the shit out of Google and Facebook. It is like our purpose for existing is making sure that advertising with a small publisher is a better option for that business. A lot of different ways to make that happen than spending money boosting a Facebook post or running Google ads is for that business. So I want to make sure that advertising and marketing with a small business is actually the best option. Um, and we do that not just to build a company. Like I didn't get in this to make money, because if I did, I probably wouldn't have picked something that took me 5 years to actually make a decent profit. Um, we do it for the small publishers across the country, the ones who have written to us and said, "Hey, man, we wouldn't even be in business if it wasn't for you guys." And because we know that they are doing something great, they are shining a light on what is going on in their community. Sometimes it's on the good things that happen, and sometimes it's on the things that people need to know about. What's going on in local government? What's going on, um, with like real estate? What's going on? They are shining a light, and really, you cannot have a healthy democracy if you don't have the journalists and reporters of the world working to shine a light in dark places. So that's why we really do it. We work with like 500 news publishers, and that's fantastic. But I know by extension, we help keep those publishers in business and shining a light in their communities. It extends to millions. And we work primarily in the US now, but have been slowly and accidentally expanding globally.
That's awesome. So I'm super excited about today's conversation because we cross paths through SaaS Academy, and I saw a post that you made on Chat GPT, and it was a presentation that you had given. When we met a couple weeks ago, I feel like I love conversations around AI, emerging technology. How do you, like, first of all, what are the use cases for it? Some of them just kind of silly party tricks, other things very, very practical, time saving things in the business. And I think I want to start out with a phrase or a quote that I heard from Dan Sullivan, which is, in 10 years, there's going to be 2 types of businesses: the businesses that are using AI in their daily operations, and the businesses going out of business. And I personally believe that, just from my experience. I've been on a journey to connect with people like you and other people that are actually trying to utilize it. I feel like there's a lot of fear around AI taking over the world, and the bad things that are going to happen or how people are going to misuse it. but I feel like personally, I am choosing to figure out how we use it for good. Because yes, bad people have always used everything in the world for bad, but there's always the heroes that are combating the negative or the ways that can be used negatively to positively influence and build a better life and world for everybody. So that's my frame leading into this conversation. I don't know if you have any opening remarks, but I'm super pumped.
I think you touch on something pretty deep. There's this eternal battle between good and evil, and I think the optimists of the world would say that good will win. Although I think movies like Terminator obviously set us up for the dystopian outlook for the future, but I don't think that's necessarily the case. It's kind of like it's like with computers and mobile phones. I don't think that there's anything that is necessarily bad. I think there are trade offs, certainly. So, the fact that we can't really, grab dinner with our significant other without checking our phone is maybe one of the drawbacks of having a computer in your pocket at all times. But at the same time, it can be certainly like handy. When your kid has a phone and they're off hanging with their friends, you kind of know where they are, can get in touch with them. So there's that too. I think there are trade offs, and I think finding the good in all change is probably not a bad way to do it.
Yeah, and I feel like there's another perspective of like, I wish we could just go back to the 1800s or whatever, people have said or say things like that. And I feel like, okay, have fun wishing. It's like the world is moving in the direction that it's moving, and it's generally like going towards ease and more comfort and all that stuff, which you have to be mindful of. But I feel like you just have to acknowledge where we're heading and then decide, are you going to be someone that makes an impact and guides or directs the direction, but you're not going to just like turn the train around and go in the opposite direction.
No, that's absolutely true, and I think that regardless, I mean, if you go back to the 1800s to somebody who's, one of their kids, is succumbing to an illness that we have, the thing is, there are trade, and I'm pretty sure they would want to live in today's world. And it fundamentally comes down to, what do you want to focus on? Do you want to focus on all the good taking place around you, about like the beauty and wonder of it all, or do you want to focus on all the negatives and wish for a time that honestly you've never experienced yourself? And if you are the kind of person who focuses on the negative, we transport you back to 1850. You're probably going to be focusing on the negatives there too. So focus on the positive.
True.
You know?
Love it. Okay, so I don't know how do you want to do this. I know you prepped some use cases, but what I'm correct me if I'm wrong. We're going to try and do in the next 30 minutes is give you what was the number, 6 or 7 practical applications of how you can take AI and use this in your daily life or in your business, like today. Is that right?
Yeah, definitely. And I'll kind of go through, yeah, it kind of starts with more or less like the party tricks, but then it gets into stuff that's like really, really time saving, and then I'll kind of end on my favorite.
Okay, sweet.
Um,
Well, let's hit it.
right. So the one that I think the one that like everyone tends to gravitate toward, at least initially, is this concept of like idea generation, right? And for anybody, and I'm not sure how many listeners might be familiar with SaaS Academy, but whether or I'm actually in publishing, and a lot of times it's about like generating ideas for stories, or like, if you're an entrepreneur and you want to write blog posts, like generating ideas is like a natural place to go to chat gpt. Personally, in practice, I don't find it to be like necessarily generating like the best ideas ever, but every now and then, if like it generates or 10 ideas, 2 of them are like really usable. So if you're an entrepreneur and you thinking about blog posts, what are some of the things I should write about related to your industry, like of course you can ask ChatGPT. What I find ChatGPT more useful for is that when you have an idea for a blog post that you really want to execute on, sometimes asking it to help like support some of your assertions. Like, yes, you can have it like make an outline. If I were to say, why, this is just an example, why the future is moving toward digital advertising, right? Um, ChatGPT can certainly make like an outline for me, but a lot of times I find that like if I can really kind of write the post, but use ChatGPT to help me find like kind of supporting arguments in favor of something, that can be really powerful. Because sometimes in the process of writing a post and like you're like, wait, do I have any evidence to really support this? Are there any examples, counter examples, or something I could use to support my assertions here? I ask ChatGPT a lot of the time while I'm writing those blog posts. So um, idea generation, but really generation of ideas in support of the thing that the content that you're actually trying to produce. So on the marketing side, I've used it a lot for that case. And of course, like, just to give you, once you write that blog post, writing like, 140 or 280 character summary, you can paste it all in the chat GPT and basically say, give me an X or Twitter post for this, a Facebook post, etc. So these are like, this is like, ChatGPT 101 that pretty much everyone uses it for.
Yeah. I just while you were talking, I went in and pulled. I just and typed that in. I'm writing an article on why the future is moving towards digital advertising. Can you provide some evidence to support examples, counterexamples? And it says, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but video content dominance with a just with an explanation, personalization at scale, blockchain in marketing, augmented reality and virtual reality, inclusive marketing, data strategy, contextual advertising, on site personalization through dynamic creative optimization, in house marketing operations. And each one of those has, I feel like to your point, you'd probably skim that and be like, the, personalization at scale or something is like really jumps out like, ooh, that's, if you can have more targeted ads, more personal ads, that's obviously going to be more useful. But yeah.
Oh, totally. And yeah, exactly. So I would kind of cherry pick the things that I kind of agree with. Getting into like augmented reality and virtual reality, that's too far off to really speak intelligently on. So, but the personalization, absolutely. The ability to target, of course, so sometimes like what it comes back with can kind of spur more ideas and kind of help you develop the concept a little further. 'Cause one of the things that like I don't know if anyone's ever had this experience when you're sometimes it's easier to edit something that already exists than start from scratch. So a lot of times if I'm having my team put together a newsletter for the next month that goes out for our company, um, they will take the first crack at it and I will just zoom in and I'll see, even if it's the complete opposite of what I wanted to say, like it kind of triggers me to write the thing that it like more effectively brings that out of me. So with ChatGPT, like if it's something that you agree with or disagree with, just having the starting point is something that you can kind of, exercise your intellect against, is a great tool because you're not starting, it's not just like tumbleweeds in your head. You have
It
something to
reminds
start
me
with.
of I would do my early career was video production, and we do these testimonial videos or client interviews for our clients, right? So the clients of our clients, and there is a skill and a craft in getting them to say something that's usable for the video. And my favorite was fill in the blank like statements, which I feel like is very analogous to what you're saying. So it's like, Kenny, I want you to say the thing that surprised me the most about working with Boolean was, and then you say on camera, the thing that surprised me, and then you just are off and running, But oftentimes I feel like I had been in interviews where they're just like, what do you want me to say? And it's if you just have, just like, get me started, start the car rolling down the hill, and then I got it. You know what I mean?
Oh, totally. Yeah, that is the exact same thing. So, on the topic of idea generation, right? And this is where I find it a little more helpful because as an entrepreneur, I'm very focused on how I can build like a very finely tuned, effective organization, and I'm focused on all the little different pieces. And SaaS Academy has been a big influence in that. And there are some, people that even Dan and SaaS Academy have been influenced by. But something that SaaS Academy is very much about is like developing like simple systems to remember things, right? So being a there will be a lot of acronyms, like, so it'll be like the SMART system for sales, right? And like SMART will be acronyms, right? And Dan has said, who's the founder or the creative SaaS Academy, Dan has said basically, um, if there's no system, like, it won't travel. And meaning that if you don't put like a concept or something into a memorable form, like, it's really going to be hard to like pass that on to somebody else and in a way that remember it, right? So a perfect example of this, and something I use ChatGPT for, is that I wanted to put a very simple like social media marketing plan together, right? And I was thinking like, all right, well, first, what do I do? Like, I come up with like the thing, or the core of the content, right? So I do a lot of webinars, I do a lot of blog posts, there's a lot of Broad Street Kenny Katzgrau content out there. So like, I'm originating the content. But then what I need someone to do is kind of like go through all of that content, sift through it, and find stuff that would make a good baseline for a social media post. Because, by the way, for if you go back in Broad Street social media, there are like years that went by when we had nobody posting to Twitter or Facebook, anything, right? So I wanted to solve this problem, make it a really simple system. So I'm like, first, like, I originate the content, then I have someone who like sifts through the stuff I've already done, just finds all the smart stuff I said and interesting things we've done, so they get that. Then I have someone who should like share it, right? This is just the person who takes the content and puts it on social media. And then sometimes that stuff is really good, it performs well, and I should have someone who boosts the post, right? So basically, I was like, whatever this is, I called it my bomb marketing plan, right? And it was so perfect because I was asking ChatGPT to like, what I would give it a word that I could use. And I would say, like, this is my process. Give me like an acronym that could describe this process effectively, right? So what it came up with was Fuse, Fuse, which is perfect for the bomb marketing plan, right? So formulate, which is me originating, uncover, which is someone on our team uncovering the good content, right? And then putting it into a spreadsheet. Share, which is someone looking at that spreadsheet and loading it into HubSpot or TweetDeck or Hootsuite or wherever they use now, Buffer. And then elevate, which is our paid marketing person swooping in to see what performed most effectively and boosting that. So FUSE made that acronym with the help of with ChatGPT. So a lot of people I've told that to, and they're like, "That's awesome. Can you send me that document?" So I have it all in a Google Doc, FUSE, 4 pages, and everyone remembers it.
But I think the thing that's great about that is, again, like Dan said, the reason people love it is because it's not anything they haven't heard before. Like everything you just said is like, yeah, obviously, but it's the packaging of the idea in a memorable acronym that's like, that's cool. Bomb marketing. It's a fuse. Got to light the fuse. Let's go. That's awesome. Would you put that? Is that still under? Are we still under the idea generation uh, piece of our 7 hit points here? Okay, so in the essence of time, I'm trying to keep an eye. We've got like 3 minutes per point in order to get all 7. So what is number 2?
All right, so number 2, this is a little more technical, but oh well, so that was actually the second version. So the first part is just generating the ideas. The second instance is actually using that idea generation for something a little more practical, which is not just your standard blog content, but refining it. And also this is like, it's for internal processes, making sure that, so we're kind of moving categories here. One's marketing, one's actually operations for your company. So just like now that we're kind of in the operations piece, because I like mentally I think of like marketing, sales, operations, product, or finance, or whatever. So I kind of move through the parts of the company. But the next part is basically, as a developer or someone who's a software developer, like and this is for the technical folks out there. Um, there are a lot of times that how to do something that ChatGPT can just do it faster. So like, you need to write some code that would probably, yes, I could Google it, I could go to Stack Overflow, start to test some code, and put something together. But let's just say I need a method or a function, or it could I need a method or function that does something that I can ask ChatGPT to do. So a perfect example is that I was writing a WordPress plugin, and I asked ChatGPT, write me a boilerplate WordPress plugin, which it did. And I said, make it so that when a API request comes in from Twilio, it takes the request and then stores that in the database, right? So I asked ChatGPT to do that. It modified the code and it wrote all the code to do that. There were a few bugs along the way, which were really annoying, but ChatGPT wrote that all out. Then what I did was I said, how about when it gets the request, which was a text message from an end user, take that and make an API call to ChatGPT and have it correct for spelling and grammar, right? So basically, I just kept telling ChatGPT to like modify this code in this WordPress plugin it was writing over time. And eventually, after some debugging, arrived at a WordPress plugin where ChatGPT was basically making a call to its own API to do the things that I needed it to do. Now, the reason that was fantastic is because I didn't know what ChatGPT's API signatures were. I did not want to use a giant code library as part of this project. I wanted to keep everything in a single file, and ChatGPT made that possible. So, whether it's writing code, whether it's writing queries for a database, like if you're a developer and you're still like Googling it and going to Stack Overflow, like ChatGPT should be number one. It should be the first thing that you
Do you use the GitHub Copilot?
Oh yeah. So right, GitHub Copilot, and then the code editor that I think a lot of people use is Visual Studio Code, and so I use Copilot within that, and yeah, it's really helpful. Where it can kind of take you the wrong way because a lot of people know that ChatGPT ain't always right. In fact, it's not right a lot of the time. Is that occasionally it writes bugs for you too. So if you don't understand exactly what it's doing, there may be hidden little bugs in there that you have to
Can come back
address.
and bite you. Yeah.
Right. So
So that's number 2, or is that number 3?
that's number 3.
3. Okay. And then number 4. And now a quick word from our sponsor, which is Boolean Review. Boolean is a review software that my wife and I own, and we sell this software to home service businesses. So I know there are many different people that listen to this podcast, but if you know someone, an electrician, an HVAC business, a painting company, maybe a coffee stand, someone that is providing service to customers and get found online by customers, we would love to talk to them. This is a review software that is the highest converting review software in the home service space in particular. And if you're wondering what that means, if you have 100 clients in your business, the typical business gets between 1 to 2% of those customers. So for every 100, they would get one person or 2 people to leave them a review on Google. Other review softwares get between 3 and 5%, and the Boolean review software gets 20% of your customers to leave you Google reviews. And these are fantastic Google reviews with lots of words, keywords that are going to help with SEO, pictures, stories, the names of your employees. So if you want to learn more, check out booleanreview.com. And now back to the episode.
All right. So number 4 is actually something that is on the sales end, right? And this is something that there are a few different ways to do it, but like you can, if you have a sales conversation and you're recording it with something like Otter or Fathom, right? These are like different or Firefly AI. They will hop on your Zoom call with you and summarize the Zoom call and give you like the primary points. And that's like a fantastic use case. But something that I did the other day, I was working with somebody that I needed to kind of interview them. I needed to get like answers to 3 questions because I wanted to write content around those 3 questions. So I had originally tried to do this by email, right? I had sent this person 3 questions that I asked them to answer, and they really just kind of didn't do a great job in giving me their response. They kind of gave me one-liners for each. And I know this is a very talkative and gregarious individual. So I said, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to get them on the phone, literally a like old school phone. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to record the conversation, and I'm just going to kind of get them into that mode where they're just talking. It's exactly what we were talking about before, where you kind of have to spark the conversation. So I asked them these 3 questions. In this case, it was like a real estate agent. And I was like, all right, yeah. So we just bumped into each other on the street. I'm like, hey, what's going on with real estate in this part of, Red Bank where we live? And he went on for probably a good like 5-10 minutes, had so much to say. But before he just gave me a one liner. So like, all right, fantastic. Next question. After about 40 minutes, I have tons of content. Now, who's going to sit through and listen to this call again, and now I got to type it all in and make the content. So what I did was I took the audio file and I uploaded it to Otter AI, right? And Otter did the transcription. It said person one, person two. It was like perfect. And then what I did was I took that to ChatGPT. I said, "This is a conversation about so and so. Here are the three questions that I asked. Um, Using the audio transcript, write brief answers to each of those questions based on the audio transcript, right? And just paste it in. And ChatGPT basically turned what would have been like 4 or 5 hours of work into like 10 minutes. It was amazing.
I was going to say that is to me that's this is probably one of the most useful use cases is where you have the outline and then you've got a lot of just like ancillary or like just content from like this conversation, and then you say like I'm going to build on what you just said. This was a random example, but we have this house that my wife and I are interested in buying, and I called the owner of the house and I had a conversation with him and understood like what he was trying to do, because I was trying to do seller financing, just different unique situation. So I had this conversation with him that was like 10 or 15 minutes long. Then I also got the Zillow information, and then I said, here are my goals and objectives for the house, and basically said, can you draft up a letter that I could send to this guy? And I wanted to include things like purpose and what is the like what was his legacy that he wanted, all this like ethereal or like just it was a complex, like a lot of different stuff. And it writes this beautiful letter of like, hey, I know you mentioned this, and and it pulls in this information from all these different things. And then you can obviously be like, make it a little bit like less professional, like use simpler language, and then it rewrites something that would sound like me or whatever. But anyways, I think that like what is it, syndication or synchronization, or what's the word I'm looking for, synthesizing of information of just like a lot of stuff from multiple places and boil it down into like this output.
Oh, totally. Yeah. So, just two notes on that. So, something that I've done in the past is like very simple agreements, especially for someone that something's not going to get litigious over, like just a short agreement with a freelancer. So, short like contracts. I actually was a recipient of a subpoena from Google and the Department of Justice over the summer in the federal antitrust thing. So, we got swept up in that. And I asked ChatGPT, I was like, write a response to the subpoena, and it did. And I was telling one of my advisors, and he was like, do not use what ChatGPT. He wanted me to go with the lawyer, which I did. But it actually did a fantastic job writing the response. It was a simplified version of what the lawyer actually did, but there are a lot of great use cases like that. Because if you ask it, I have another friend who's a social worker, and for their cases, they have to be formatted a certain way when they take it to court. So what they do now is, or what he does, is that he takes all the facts of the case and asks ChatGPT to basically write a report. The standard is already well known, and then ChatGPT knows it, and then just takes all those facts and writes it in the report, and has received some commendation from the judge in these cases because of how well everything was formatted. It's crazy. Um,
All right,
so-
number 5.
okay, number five is one of my favorites, and this is like one of the highest leverage items for any entrepreneurs out there, or really if you're in a company or you're management or something like that. But basically, for process documentation, everyone knows it's like kind of like something you got to do, especially for the key processes in a company. What I have been doing is that I will just verbally dictate how a process works. So, like our sales process, it's got like a bunch of different steps, and I added a whole lot of details to how each step was performed. But I verbally dictate into the recorder on my phone, and then what I do is I send it over to ChatGPT and ask it I tell it that this is a process documentation, verbally dictated, and to break it down into steps that I can copy and paste into a Google Doc, right? Now, keep in mind, like this was like a 5 minute long video or recording. I made all kinds of mistakes. I said like, ahs. I was like, all right, scratch that, erase that last sentence, because it's hard to get it perfect. So, and when I got the transcript from the phone, there was zero punctuation. I'm like, well,
It's
let's
just
do it.
yeah.
And ChatGPT nailed it. It nailed it. It gave me a 12-step process that, by the way, I just hired a new salesperson this year, just came on in January. And that's the documentation that they went over. Of course, I corrected a few things along the way. But the reason that's so powerful is that a lot of times as business owners, we don't get an opportunity to document the process. So what we end up doing is spending our time repeating ourselves to different people that join the team. So with this written document, I have leverage now that any new salesperson who joins a team, I can just give them that document. Importantly, though, now my team is doing the same thing. Now they're the ones verbally dictating and creating process documentation. So we took the process of creating documentation and like really drove down the total time investment required. And in the process, we're actually spending far less time repeating ourselves and telling each other what to do, right? So basically, in anytime you're getting more work done with less effort, that's called leverage. And building a successful business is all about leverage. That's the key. So that's one of my favorite use cases because I use that probably like a few times a week.
I love that. And that's a super practical one for like how often do you like for me, I just sitting down in front of the computer to write out step by step or to document what I do is just painful and hard sometimes, but just instead just as I'm driving around or on the way back from the gym be like, all right, what do I do? And it's just the ability to use your voice when you're not in front of a computer to start the process and then just refine it when you get back to the computer is great.
Absolutely. So
Number
last
number 6.
Yeah, so this is the last one, and this is a little more technical, but it's something that you have to know about. So we've been talking a lot about ChatGPT, right? But occasionally you run into a limit of like how much you can send to ChatGPT, right? So a good example is like something that we do is NPS scores, Net Promoter Scores. So basically, of all your users, like what's their rating out of 10? You ask them some questions and so you have tons of, especially if you have hundreds of responses, like where do you even begin? You have the quantitative data of how people rated you, but when you have the qualitative feedback, right? Like how do you go over 400 responses and get a general sense of like what the top 5 priorities for the next quarter should be? You don't, right? Now, if you can feed them all into ChatGPT, this is another great use case. You can have ChatGPT find like what are the 5 things that people seem to be talking about the most, right? But whether it's something like that, or maybe if you have like a knowledge base that you would love. Imagine ChatGPT could consume everything, and you give it your entire knowledge base, right? And then your customer support reps or your customers could basically ask a question that ChatGPT could deduce from your knowledge base, right? So this is called retrieval augmented generation, and it's basically like you've heard build your own chatbot. There's a framework called Llama Index, right? That a lot of developers use. It's a Python framework. There's another one called LangChain, and you can consume like all of your own data. And what it does is it creates these things called embeddings that um, for different providers. But what you can do is basically work with OpenAI, the underlying engine for ChatGPT, to uh, basically ask questions about your own data, right? So if you have, megabytes and megabytes of text feedback from customers, what you can do is use Llama Index to consume all of that and then query against it, basically build your own chatbot. So the way we're using this internally is that we have consumed all of our knowledge base. We've consumed all of our webinars, all of our PDF documentation, all of our Help Scout, our Zendesk responses to customers. And at this point, we have in a robot what is essentially like our smartest and most capable employee, right? Because now you can ask it a question and it is remarkably accurate in terms of what we would say to our customers.
Mm. Do you think that it's like in that situation, could I, something that I've thought about is that I have all these emails to and from customers over the last 18 months of little questions, bugs, things so like, hey, this isn't working. Is it to the point where you could just like, I don't even know if you can export all emails from Gmail, but just be like, here's a bunch of emails from the last year and take out the prompt, the like key issues that customers had, and then document our responses so that next time a question comes in, it can go reference the database of what we've used in the past to resolve that issue. Is that possible?
So the way I see it playing out is not even having to export it. And I was actually speaking to a friend of mine who's about to finish up his PhD, and has a startup called Mysterian, and he was giving me a demo. And basically, Mysterian is it starts out as a Chrome plugin, but you can connect it to your Gmail, and it does exactly that. So not only can you ask it questions like that, like what are the most common threads, when you get an email from somebody you can have it suggest a response, right? Yeah. So that's probably the way it's going to play out. And the way my friend Shamoon at Mysterian is going to do it is that he also wants to plug in not just Gmail, but also into Zendesk and different places because as a company, your stuff is everywhere. You've got stuff in HubSpot, you got stuff in Google Drive, you got stuff um, all over the place. But all of that is important. Have you ever had that moment where you're like, oh, where did we have that spreadsheet? I know we had that, but like you're looking through your email, you can't find it in Google Drive. Like, there are real problems that AI could solve. And like, that's another thing. You spend 30 minutes looking for that spreadsheet, or maybe an hour or 2 hours. And like, there's some tool in the future that could kind of resurface that within a couple seconds. That's really powerful. So,
Yeah, and I just think that to me, people like there's probably someone that's like, oh, it's not. How is that going to be accurate? It's like just the fact that you could have like I have a an executive assistant who manages my email, and so she's trying to gain like learn and understand how to respond to more and more and more of my emails because most of the things are like occasionally there's something that's like has to be Chris's response like but it's way less than I thought it was when I started this because I was afraid to get an executive assistant because my people are asking me for stuff that and again Dan Martell talked about like people just want an answer and they prefer that it's faster, so if it's going to take me 24 hours to get them an answer, or my assistant can get them an answer in an hour, that's fantastic. Um, but yeah, I feel like to me, it's like if you had a draft of like, so D gets an email and it's like, here, this is what we are suggesting. She could read that and be like, doesn't really make sense, or I'm not sure about that, and then go do some additional research, which she would have had to do anyways. But how many times out of 10 is it going to nail that, on the first time? And she's just like, and she responds to an email in 30 seconds that would have taken 5 minutes or 10 minutes or a half hour or whatever.
yeah, all of those really add up over time. And yeah, it's like they say, like author, not editor. So, I'm all about like the human review. You need that because it'll occasionally say something that's flat out incorrect that it's going to happen. I'm sure it'll get better, but I feel like there's always that risk. And at some point, it's pretty much the same thing as you would expect from a human, that's going to screw up occasionally.
And that's the other thing is that I feel like people always, it's like self-driving cars that Elon Musk has talked about how like self-driving cars are literally going to have to be so perfect that in order to make it so that like it's most dangerous for a self-driving car when you have humans also driving. If every car was self-driving, then they'd all be following standard rules because they wouldn't be swerving because they're drunk or running red lights. Like all this stuff would just not ever happen because you're following, like the computers are in charge. But the self-driving car has to get good enough to drive with humans that make tons of errors, and then once humans are no longer allowed to drive, it'll be so like it's like playing in easy mode all of a sudden for the cars. You know what I mean? Because everything's now known, or there's far less unknowns, I should say. But I feel like that's people will frequently point out where ChatGPT or AI messed up. and it's like, how many times did you mess up today? Like we make mistakes all the time, but we just look past human mistakes, and we're just trying to find the flaws in AI.
I think we're afraid that, like, it's going to be harder to hold someone accountable. Like, if someone crashes their car, we can just be like, all right, you're in jail, that problem's solved. But like if a
Yeah.
self-driving car crashes, it's just like, who, everyone's like, I don't know, there's a bug somewhere, I guess. I don't know. No
Elon
one
goes to
loses their
jail.
job. No one so much as loses a job. So,
Yeah,
well,
yeah,
probably, but
yeah. Um, awesome. Well, any other things from AI? We've got maybe 3 or 4 minutes for another bonus. If you got something else that's on your mind.
those are the big ones. That build your own chatbot. There are a few different services out there, and there's more and more of them that will consume your own data. Just something to be aware of is that with those build your own chatbot services, is that permissioning a lot of the times, like the access control list, is really an unsolved issue in a lot of places. So if, for example, and I heard that IBM, for example, is working on this, like, your best employee, consume all of your data with AI and then index it and make it available as like a searchable knowledge base. Well, you want to make sure that different tiers of employees have access to only the stuff they should be seeing, right? There shouldn't, like, because if you have it consuming all this stuff, inevitably some of it's going to be sensitive. So how do you control, and like, that's actually not an easy problem to solve. There are real technical challenges. So it's being aware of the stuff that you are consuming. Think of who is potentially going to be querying over that.
Yeah, and then you're going to have to take into consideration the access level of the user asking the question, and have kind of a knowledge of this person has, this level or like up to here, but they can't ask about wages and salaries, or like the contract language or whatever. Yeah, that's super interesting, because it's gonna, if you the ideal would be you just say, here's access to everything digital that we have, our Google Drive, our emails, everything. It's just sucking up all that data. And then how do you, like, because if you had to, if there's a huge process of indexing and tagging, and like, that's not going to ever get adopted because it's way too time consuming to get all the data incorrectly. It's got to be able to understand what it's looking at, and then understand what a given access level can receive.
Right. Something that is kind of peripherally related is that, in terms of the stuff you can ask it to do or you can ask it for, you can also extend ChatGPT and or OpenAI and this retrieval augmented generation with functions. So you can basically imagine, this is the use case. Imagine you're using a SaaS app like BroadStreet and you're saying, archive all advertisers that haven't been active in the last, like, 5 years, right? If you can kind of, instead of like going through and clicking through it, as the developer, what you can do is you can specify functions that it can execute or tell you to execute has if a user has asked for that specific thing. So it's kind of like taking AI and ChatGPT from like purely interface that we think about like querying and asking it for things, and having it actually do things, or having it actually appear to do things. And that's where we kind of get into like the Terminator thing, to bring it full circle. When you start empowering it to kind of instruct to execute certain functions, then it gets interesting. But I think most SaaS apps will have some form of that, and I can't wait to host a webinar where, for us, we have Broadsheet's all about advertising and small publishers. When we say our chatbot that we call Alva, which is basically Thomas Alva Edison, he's a New Jersey guy, so we named it after him, and we say, hey Alva, create a spec ad for Surf Taco, which is like a taco place in town. And when it does that, basically executing some functions we already empowered it to do, that's gonna blow minds. And when you know how something works, the magic is removed a little bit. But for everyone else who has no idea how it works, it's gonna be some real, like, David Blaine, David Copperfield stuff. So
I love that. Moving into the wrap-up questions, what are your 3 book recommendations?
Oh yeah. So one of my favorites, I was just talking to Shamoon about it yesterday, and just by chance, I hadn't talked to Shamoon in forever. The Black Swan by Nasim Talib. Some of you might be familiar with the phrase "the Black Swan." He's a statistician, philosopher, former New York City stockbroker, really intelligent guy. Wrote that and a book called Anti-Fragile that I'm a really big fan of. Another a book that I'm reading right now that I absolutely love, recommended to a friend, The Unwavering Power of Focus. I think the author's name is Dandapani. Um, Somewhat like meditative, but extremely practical too. But it's about like the focus of your mind and like, all of the applications of really being able to understand your mind and use it as the most powerful tool at your disposal. We spent a lot of time talking about artificial intelligence, but your mind is the most powerful thing that you can learn to use effectively. And I'm gonna have to say, just like being a Jersey guy, Bruce Springsteen's biography is amazing. It's deep. It's not all about music. And if you're a Springsteen guy, I mean, he's up there with Bob Dylan and
What's that
Joni
book called?
Mitchell.
What's his biography called?
Born to Run.
Born to Run.
This was recommended to me too. And I read this in Steve Jobs' biography, which is also incredible. But I probably didn't have to mention that because almost everyone's read it. But that is a fantastic book. And if you're like a creator, if you're someone really just trying to be authentic and be yourself, and you want to read a success story of how someone else did it and their journey, because it wasn't overnight for him, it's phenomenal. So,
And what was the title of that one? I wasn't looking at the screen.
Born to Run.
No, I thought you said there was a second one, or is that it?
Oh, Steve Jobs biography.
Oh yeah,
I meant
that's just called Jobs, right?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's up here. Maybe I have it at the house.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. And what is your favorite movie?
Shawshank Redemption.
Ooh, classic.
Yeah. In fact, one of our services at Broad Street is named after Red.
I love it.
Maybe it's because I'm Irish.
Yeah, you probably knew this, but Shawshank Redemption is the #1 movie in the world on IMDb, highest rated. It's just such a great movie.
Oh yeah, it was fighting The Godfather for a long time for that #1 spot, and somehow Dark Knight got up. I don't know if Dark Knight belongs in the top 10, but yeah, I look at that occasionally to see how
That's funny. And what is if someone wants to reach out to chat with you, what's your preferred method that they do that?
Email, definitely. So Kenny, Kenny at broadstreetads.com. So all one word, broadstreetads.com. That's kind of my thing. Like my EA is out on my inbox. I'm looking at my inbox all day. Even my personal email doesn't even get as much attention. So Kenny at Broadsheet Ads.
Well, Kenny, thanks so much. This has been super fun. Thanks for coming on and chatting. I love the AI discussion, and I want to get more conversations like this with other people. So I know you have some connections, and for the listeners out there, we will have several more episodes coming up with other AI AI related things, just because I believe that we have to understand it if we're going to use it, and especially if we're going to use it for good, we have to understand what's possible. So thank you so much, Kenny.
Hey, thank you for having me, Chris. It was a fun conversation. And in terms of more people with that topic, I have some great recommendations. I'll be happy to send them along.
Awesome.
Thank you for having me, Chris.
Thank you so much for listening. My name is Chris Kiefer, and my mission is to champion the relentless pursuit of purpose. And what that means to me is to be an example, a champion, someone that is in the trenches, working and showing and winning and trying and failing in how to pursue a deeper and more meaningful life with the people that I love, with my kids, with my friends, with our family, and also just be a champion and example of entrepreneurship and following my passion and doing what I believe I'm called to on this earth. And so if that inspires you in some way, please share this episode. If you want, like, subscribe, share, whatever, do all the stuff. It means the world to me to get this message and get these guests that I have out there. And if you're interested in any of the book recommendations or looking up other episodes, the movie list, you can visit my website, chriskiefer.com, for all the details on the show, and also check out the Boolean review software, as well as the Boolean automation consulting company that I own for home service businesses. So thank you so much, and we'll see you on the next episode.